Nandini Chatterjee Singh. She is the head of the Rethinking Learning Department team at UNESCO MJIP, also a neuroscientist herself. And I give her the space to now introduce everybody and just begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody here?
It's the only pair I have. So
everyone's on that side. Look, if this was a boat, we would.
So I know you're exhausted and probably just dying to go and dip your toes in the water out there. You've had enough of listening. But at the beginning of the conference, I got appointed children's ambassador. So I need to take something back to the kids, okay? So which is why we are having the solution session. And we brought along people who've been part of most sessions and are acting as voices for a number of solutions that might have come up across the conference. So that's Kimberly on my extreme left, Paul next to me, Nirmal on my right, and Chris on my extreme right. And I think you know all of them by now, so we don't need an introduction. And we want to keep this short, okay? So I'm actually going to try and do takeaways that we had from the children's panel. And one of the first ones was teachers could be nicer, could be kinder, and shouldn't compare too much, okay? So that is why I think you remember the kids talking about that. So I'm going to take it back to Kimberly and say, how can we try and do that? Has the conference provided any input on that?
Thank you, Nandini. I think, this whole idea of teacher care and kindness, there's really been a burgeoning research in the past few years really showing the importance of teachers and teacher-student relationships for learning and how teacher caring is really related to motivation. Students who are in classrooms in which they feel their teachers care, which they feel connected, learn more, are more successful, have more positive attitudes towards school. And so I think this idea, I'm going to take two things away from what the kids were saying. One is we've done some research where we've actually asked the students, what do teachers do to show they care? And think about asking the students themselves, what do teachers do to show they care? And we found a couple of interesting findings. One, when we did a high school, and we went around and asked students, and we asked kids who are really successful on the honor roll, kids who are average, kids who are at risk for dropout. The number one thing they said across all three groups was a teacher who says hello to me in the hallway by my name. So simple. And then they talked over and over again about things that teachers who really listen to me when I have something to say, who help me learn, who ask how I'm doing, who make learning interesting, who have fun, who themselves like the subject they're teaching. So we know so much of how kids, how important that is. And then I want to just talk about one research study was done just a couple of years ago, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, where they tried to look at teachers' mindsets about discipline practices in high schools. And they tried to switch teachers from having a punitive mindset, saying, kids who misbehave have to go to the office, they either shame them or humiliate them, embarrass them, to changing teachers' mindsets to an empathic mindset of being able to see the students' misbehavior from an empathic lens. And they showed through just two short video lessons for teachers, where teachers heard the stories of students who had a teacher respond to them with kindness and empathy when they did something wrong. And they showed that they were able, by just helping teachers learn to have an empathic mindset, they actually reduced suspensions by 50%. So this notion of teachers and caring, I think what we have to, I really believe that one of the take-home messages is we have to empower teachers to realize the power they have and how much their kindness, caring, and connection to their students will help their students be successful, but will also help their well-being.
So I think one of the sessions also focused on the fact that not just teachers need to be kinder, but we need to be kinder to teachers. And teachers need to take care of themselves, okay? So I think that's another very important takeaway that this conference brought about, is that it's going to work both ways. It's not going to be a one-way traffic. Because unless the teachers feel kinder about themselves and are able to practice some level of self-compassion, they will not be able to do that back in their classrooms. So we all need to practicing what we preach. So spend the evening trying to do one act of kindness in the evening today. Another important takeaway which the students had was learning should be fun, colorful, experimental. In short, learning should be playful, okay? The concept of play is something that they underscored very strongly. So I have on my left Paul, who I think embodies play, okay? And he's tried to do that in almost every form of learning since the time I've known him. So Paul, over to you on your thoughts about play.
Thank you, thank you. I think it's obvious to most of us that play is the most fundamental way that we learn. And I've noticed throughout the conference that we like to go to the animal kingdom in order to use and find examples. And I think what we'll find is even animals learn through play, right? When a little kitten is pawing at a ball, right, it's learning how to kill things, right, in a very playful way, right? So, and I think that you'll notice that many animals use play as a form of learning. And human beings, especially, why are children so driven to play? I mean, I have young children, all they ever want to do is play, and that's evolution's way of incentivizing learning in our youth. And somehow we've sterilized that from our learning institutions. Over time, and I always blame industry for these things. As a result of that, we don't have enough play in our education system. And what that translates into, it's really interesting, is that we always tell our students to work hard. And I'd like to make a distinction between work and labor. Right? Labor is a very onerous, burdensome, coercive form of work. And we've associated work to be labor in most instances. And those of us, the very few of us who are lucky to work in something that we love or we're passionate about, you know that work doesn't feel like labor. Work just feels like what you go and do because you love to do it. But for most of us, and for most of our students, we've induced a regime of labor. And we've associated labor with success. And labor is exactly the opposite of play. And this is a mentality that pervades all of society because we've become an industrialized society. It's the single most prevalent paradigm in the modern world. So as a result of that, labor has just become something that we absolutely associate with work. And what I'd like to contemplate is what if, when I see a kid playing, they're playing very hard. Play can be a lot of work. They work very hard when they play. So how can we start reconceiving of the way that we're educating our children in such a way that we're leveraging the incredible learning potential of play, which has been in the works through maybe even millions of years of evolution versus whatever we've come up with in the last 150 years, how we can leverage the power of play as a form of pleasant, engaging, and passionate work in order to service our students in the best possible way. And the second part of the question has to do with experiments, right? And experiments are what connect our classroom to the real world. And I'm a huge fan of experiential learning. Unfortunately, if you look at a school, right? Schools are the incubators where we prepare our young people for the world. But really strangely, nothing in the real world looks like a school. Those of you who are in the professional world, when's the last time you wrote an exam, right? When's the last time you sat in rows and listened to somebody speak to you, right? It's almost somebody in the future will look back at the absurdity that we were keeping children in boxes under these highly artificial circumstances under the auspices of preparing them for the real world, right? So what we have to do is actually connect our students to the real world. Experiments are one of those windows that connect students to the real world. But let's extend beyond experiments and take learning back into the community to make the labor, the work of our children connect back to the world that they live in. Take them to workplaces, learn from the environment and the community. And I think by having more experiential learning experiences, learning by doing, learning in situ, learning where the activities take place, you will also find that that will engage our students in such a way that learning will not be labor, it will be pleasant and passionate and engaging work.
Thank you, Paul. That was very inspiring. And I think the best evidence of what play can do was something that we actually built evidence for in this conference. And my friend Robin sitting there will confirm for you that the most crowded session throughout this conference was the games bar, okay? Students and youngsters and even adults and older people just thronged it, so much so that we had to bring in crowd control. And I think that's evidence enough that people love to play, and I think we developed some of it at the conference right away. But your idea about experiments takes me right away to what Nirmal has been doing. And Nirmal has been trying to bring in experiments and contextual learning back into classrooms, starting out in rural areas, okay, where children have been deprived to quite an extent and where learning has really been a burden. This was also something that one of the kids brought about how do I use, or why should I care about what happened 500 years ago? How do I make it contextual and relevant so a child is able to realize the relevance of what was learned across history back in today's classroom, and even what the relevance of science that we teach in the classrooms becomes relevant in everyday learning. So Nirmal, could you share a little bit of what you've learned through this?
Thanks, Nandini. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the Indian education system, I think I just want to run through that very quickly. There are about 300 million children going to school from ages 6 to 14. 70% of them are from rural areas. 70% of these kids go to the public school system, where they cannot, the basic needs of their learning are not being met. That is not to say the private school system is doing it better. It is not either. So in essence, what is happening across the system is you have large number of kids coming out of the system who are not able to even read and write and do basic arithmetic. Forget critical thinking. So this is the reality. And a lot of times teachers are branded as culprits in this system. They are not. Many teachers I've met in the public school system are very well-meaning, but are constrained and confined by the pressures of the system. They are as much a prisoner as the children are. So, given this reality, what is it that we can do within the confines of the system? Because systemic change takes years. So it's not going to happen in a day. So today, in the next 10 years, there are going to be about 200 million children, or 250 to 300 million children going to graduate out of secondary school. What do we do for them now? I think there are simple things you can do. What we have seen is, given the opportunity, these are children who have been written off as kids, underperforming kids, slow learners. These guys can't learn. These children, when given the opportunity to do basic play, like what Paul was referring to, simple play, but with a certain structure and certain resource constraints as well, within the confines, the so-called confines of the curriculum, do absolute brilliant jobs. I'll just give you an example. A group of grade 9 children, when given the task of demonstrating Newton's laws, devised a small setup. This is, mind you, with these kids, the teacher had told us, these kids will not be able to do anything. These kids don't speak up in class. Four kids, including one girl child, built a small gadget with the bottoms of paper cups, cutouts. Those were the wheels. I wish I could show you the picture. It is awesome. Post-it notes rolled into an axle, and they've taped up plastic cups, the caps of a plastic water bottle along the axle. So you have two wheels, an axle made of post-it notes and paper cups around the axle. And what they did is they took a water bottle and poured the water from a height. It hits the paper cup and it starts rotating. And they were able to, what is more exciting is they were able to articulate what is happening. That's amazing. These kids, you ask them Newton's laws of motion, they might not be able to give you the definition. But how are these guys doing it? The thing is, embedded, I don't take too much time. I keep going on about this because if you look at a classroom of any children, you divide them into groups. It's like a parallel computer. They quickly, very quick, they start exploring options so quickly. It is just amazing. You give these guys the opportunity. You can do it within your classroom. You don't need any magic bullet. You don't need a supercomputer for this. Just the brain is the best parallel supercomputer right now. There's nothing around anywhere in the universe right now which beats that, at least as far as I know. Maybe Chris can talk about that better. I have a computer scientist sitting next to me and I'm making statements. So he can beat me on the head if he likes. But it's an amazing system. So we should tap into that, and I'd like to hear what Chris thinks about it too, because I heard you're doing interesting stuff about it.
Great, so I think Nirmal has already passed on the buck to you.
Okay.
I was hoping to pin you down with how we could take this to scale, which is what something that this conference really hoped to do. We seem to have encountered wonderful ideas, but how do we scale them has been a challenge, and maybe you might have some initial answers for us.
I think there's a thread that brings us all together. You know, look at the people around you, right? There's hundreds of us in this room, and there's so many great talks that we've had this entire conference. And I think there is one thing that brings us and unites us. And that's, we all have a shared vision and a shared dream. I think every person in this room is here because they care. And they care about having beautiful, inspiring, new education for everybody. You know, some of us have had a wonderful education ourselves, and we don't just desire it for one person, we desire it for everybody here, everybody in Andhra Pradesh. And it's a beautiful thing. And if there is one takeaway from this conference, maybe that takeaway is that there's people from different cultures and hundreds of us caring about the same thing at the same time. But I want to speak a little bit about the moment. You know, December 2019. Because I think this is a special moment in time. For thousands of years, people have been teaching. But really, for the first moment in history, we have tools at our disposal that really are going to allow us to rewrite the rules of education. We have education at scale. For the first time, there is platforms where hundreds of millions and soon to be billions of students are learning. And there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. And I think that the reason that this UNESCO conference is so important is because we've learned a little bit about our first attempt to scale education. 2019 is not the first time that we put educational material online, but maybe we can start the conversation of how we can put material online to fit that dream that we all have, that dream of better education, that beautiful social emotional learning, you know, that is joyful and truly can speak to everybody in rural communities, in cities. So how are we going to use these tools? Unfortunately, if we're not careful, I think we know that we won't use them to their full potential. And the answer to using them to their full potential largely rests on you. How we're going to reimagine education should not be the five of us on stage making that decision. It should be coming from you, people who are on the ground and experiencing it. It should be tools made for teachers to make them better practitioners. So I hope you feel a little bit of the responsibility of this amazing moment of time. It's a joyful one because we have an opportunity that generations in the past have not. But we don't know the answers. We have to invent them. So there is a great challenge ahead of us. And I would say that would be one of the takeaways I've got from this conference.
So for me, one of the greatest takeaways that seems to have come across is children as agents of change. Okay, I think I'm certainly getting more and more convinced that we need to put back some of that power back into the hands of the child. Kimberly talked about social emotional learning, and if you go back and look into the world, children demonstrate social emotional learning all the time. Okay? They're just born social emotional people. In the course of becoming adults, we tend to sort of lose that. How about making the child the teacher now? And as adults, we begin to learn from them as children. We've forgotten how to play. Paul pointed that out to us. But children haven't forgotten. Maybe it's time to bring back them as partners and learn to play from them. Okay? So the way I see it, we have to do some level of unlearning, do some new learning, and now through the hands of the children. And I want everybody on stage to comment on that. Would you like to say something?
Well, I do believe that children who are invested in learning, when they're given a voice, when they're given that sense of autonomy, will be more engaged, and I think that's so important. And I also want to say something. We know that Chris was saying something about the technology, but I have to say equally advances are in our understanding of social emotional side of learning. And so that idea that children can be engaged, that these social emotional skills, because that they can be learned, that we now know they're malleable. But I do want to say something about why we need the two in combination at all times, okay? Because in some ways, you can use technology for bad things. Like you can, if the future generation learns the technology skills without compassion, without empathy, without social justice, without humanity, we can really do a lot more harm than good. So I just really want to emphasize that idea of the students engaging them, but realize that we have to have the two in combination, or we're doomed.
Paul, what about you?
So, hello. One thing that I'm a bit of a radical thinker, and I hope that before my days on this planet are over, I would love to see some of these radical thoughts become a reality. And one of the things that I think is so important about what you said is the idea that our children kind of know the world that we live in a little bit better than we do. Right? The world that they inhabit, and that changes from region to region, from country to country. It's always dangerous to make generalizations about what world a child inhabits. But I certainly know that in my world, the children that I'm in almost daily contact with, the adolescents that I'm in daily contact with, live in a significantly different world than the adults in their lives. And in many ways, it's predictive of the world we're going to be moving into. So we have a great deal to learn about children, just like they have a great deal to learn from us. And what it also, what it points to, and this is where the kind of more radical thinking is, I've always been very suspicious and skeptical of the idea of dividing children according to grades and segregating them according to age groups, separating them from all other age groups and allowing them to create norms and values within their closed circle of grades. Because, as is very apparent in India, more so than North America, is that social health occurs in multi-generational interaction. When you have grandmothers and grandchildren and uncles and aunts and cousins and children all working together, everybody has a contribution towards the community. And we evolved as a species that was meant to operate in a multi-generational environment. So the more we can recapture dialogue across the ages, where we're not separating children by age group and sort of, banking information into their brains at every step of the conveyor belt, the more we recapture the essence of our species and the better we recapture social health. So I absolutely think it's vital that we bring children's voices into the mix.
Yeah, so I personally believe that children come with somehow within pre-existing knowledge. Like if you were to look at social emotional learning, which I believe is completely integral to education, because otherwise children can't learn if their internal makeup and their emotional stability is not there. I think they come already with a deep sense of justice, fairness. There's already built in, because I believe humans are social animals. We are already built to take care of others. We are sort of unschooled by going through school. Actually, we are sort of losing the ability to relate to each other. I think His Holiness keeps saying, there's a seed of compassion in everybody. You just water it. You don't need anything else. So you just create the environment, it comes out. Similarly with science and math learning, of course, they need structure and scaffolding to go to the next stage. But they're very well capable of learning, taking ownership of their learning and actually driving the learning. They're very well capable of teaching each other. You don't need to sit and keep talking to them all the time. So I think that is well, at least in my experience, and they're, like I said, it's like a parallel computer. The number of things they come up with is absolutely brilliant. The creativity is just bursting out of the seams. Just give them the opportunity, they'll do it. So I think we have a lot, it's a transactional thing. We no longer sit in front of somebody and talk to each other. It's more of like a egalitarian. Can't be too egalitarian either, but it's more of a dialogue. And I think in both ways it enriches both the teacher and the student. So that's what I think. Over to you.
I think what's just been said is very incredibly important. And maybe I can build on what you said with a very concrete example. So I teach at a university, Stanford University, and I believe, and the students believe they're getting an amazing education. And sometimes some people ask me, what's the magic? Like, why is this working so well at your university? And particularly the computer science department, what is going so right? And the answer will surprise you. What's going so right is that in order to be successful undergraduate at Stanford, to be a student at Stanford, you take a class, you take a second class, but then for us to acknowledge what you know, you must turn around and become a teacher. We have a radically different way of teaching, and it builds on what you guys speak about. And it's magical because not only does it mean we have incredible education at scale, not only does it mean that it's socially, emotionally learning, it means that the students who speak the language of their generation are teaching. It also changes the students, like you said. We've all had moments when we went from being kids to being adults. And often that moment comes with responsibility. We are not giving our students that much responsibility. But when you ask them to teach, when you say you are responsible for someone else's knowledge, that changes how they see themselves. And it's one of those big steps in that path to becoming a responsible adult. So I love this conversation. What a pleasure to have it.
So if we are indeed to be mindful, and the fact that a number of heads seem to be going back to their mobile phones, I'm going to try and take this discussion back there to build some engagement again. So let's get some questions or comments from the audience. That's a strategy for a teacher to use for bringing engagement back into the space they're working with, not a classroom. So can we have a couple of microphones being thrown around? I like that, microphones being thrown around.
Yeah.
We're already beginning to play.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is it audible, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible.
What is the basic difference between Indian university and foreign university with the pedagogy or teaching? What is the basic difference?
You want to take that? Foreign versus the Indian?
So I spent about 20 years in the US. I went to the US because I was advised not to do higher education in India. But I think for various reasons. But I think this, when you this question itself is in a certain sense, if I would say, flawed, because you cannot club an entire system into one bucket. So there are different kinds, like what Chris was alluding to. You will find as bad an education in the United States as you would in India. And there are excellent schools here. There are wonderful teachers here. So I don't think you'll be able to ever answer the question in a straightforward way. Barring that, especially at the school education system, the way I see it is we could improve upon giving the teacher first a sense of freedom. Let him or her decide what is important to a certain degree with support, and open up the classrooms. I think that within 10 years, we'll see a sea change in the, because see, everything comes from school, like primary school. If the child is allowed to think critically, I think the ramifications are huge. Don't worry about university. Look at early childhood education and primary school education. That's good enough. So that's what I think.
Anybody else has questions? You want to top that up?
No, I'm just going to plus this idea that I can't speak to Indian education system the way that you can. But one thing I can say is that there is a trend among all education systems, and that seems to be how we treat our students and how we treat our teachers. If teachers have enough time, if they have enough resources, their hearts seem to be universally in the right place. And the greatest education systems often are the ones that just support them and let them do their thing.
And I just was going to add one other thing, and I don't know how true it is here, but we've seen, at least in Canada, really increasing rates of mental illness among our young people, particularly those now in university. And so I don't know, I saw from the statistics that Richie presented, and so I don't know if here in the same way have I seen in the US and in Canada, increasing recognition that in addition to helping young people be successful academically, there also is more of a focus, not enough yet, on their mental well-being as well.
Thank you. Let's make this into a game. Why don't you throw it and the person who can catch it gets the question?
No,
It's too
I don't have a
targeted.
question. I'll answer to that question.
Interesting.
The basic difference is the relevance of education to real world. I have studied, I've done masters 40 years ago. Never used it in my life. That's the basic difference.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all. But I'll let it pass.
This question is for Paul. Paul, one big key thing which Canadian K-12 education system can learn from Indian system, and Indian system can learn from Canadian education system, especially in the K-12 space.
Okay, so I don't think I'm qualified to know. I'm learning about the Indian system through the sessions and the kinds of answers that I'm getting. So I don't think I'm qualified to know. I'm sure we could learn a lot from the Indian system. I just don't think I'm qualified to answer what specifically because I'm not sufficiently informed. And one interesting thing about Canadian education is we don't have a federal Ministry of Education. We don't have one central governing authority over the whole country. We have regional education systems according to the province, which goes almost to the foundation of Canada when we acknowledge we're a massive country with very few people. I think there are more people probably in Delhi than in all of Canada. It's an exaggeration, but it's pretty close to it. And we have very different regional interests across Canada. We have a huge diversity of regional interests, so we want to articulate our education system to be sensible for the region in which we're in. So one thing that I appreciate about my region, and there's things to be celebrated from every region, is that the Ministry of Education in the province of Ontario gives a great deal of autonomy and agency to their teachers. They trust their teachers to take very flexible curriculum and to apply that in a way that is meaningful to their unique cultural context. Because in education, cultural contexts don't just change from region to region, from city to city, they change from school to school. I was speaking to somebody the other day and I said, my school is actually completely different from the other school 3 blocks away. The types of students, the mentality, the teachers, the resources, the building, everything is different. So the idea of creating large-scale templates and imposing these on huge regions is a big mistake. I mean, there are some things you can generalize, but I think we have to do a better job of articulating to very specific cultures within education. And I think that the ministry in my province in particular has done a very good job of creating a fairly flexible template that each teacher can then bend to the unique needs of their cultural environment or their cultural institution.
If I may add to that, I'm not really going to talk about the school education system, but I think in terms of the diversity of Indian society, the kind of flexibility we build in our thinking makes a very big difference. And you can see Indians have gone across the world and have settled in really well. I find them adapting to the local culture a lot more and a lot more easily because they're used to diversity in their life setting. It's extremely normal in India to have a heterogeneous classroom. In the United States or Canada, it's still very much a homogeneous classroom. And I think that's one reason that has helped a lot of these students survive and grow in these very different environments. I think that's a huge plus. This is not working out right. We need to play.
Okay.
Come on. Maybe the last two questions.
I'll be asking from a student's perspective because I'm a student myself. From all these years, whenever I talk about education system with my friends, we come to a conclusion that there is an irony which exists in our system. And that irony is, for example, when I was in 6th and 7th grade, I was taught about stereotypes, discriminations, and how to prevent it, and that this is not good. Discrimination is not good, gender segregation is not good. But then when I reached to adolescence, I started experiencing it. In books, in school, we look at the world with rose-colored glasses. They teach how the ideal world should be. And when we step out, we realize it's not like that. And then I started thinking that, hey, why are they doing this? They went to school. Didn't they know that discrimination is not good? And then later I realized that the teacher who taught me about discrimination, gave me full marks for writing the answer on how to prevent it, herself doesn't follow it. So what is your take on the irony which exists and how we can avoid it?
Well, I think we started out with that. We need to start practicing what we preach. So there's a simple answer there, and somewhere we need to be able to find those tools, which is what social and emotional learning does, is to resolve the cognitive dissonance of what we talk about. So if you feel and really feel for it, then practice it. Don't say one thing and practice something else. And I think that's necessary for behavioral change to happen.
And I would just add one more thing.
Sure.
I think it's so important about the teachers embodying the social emotional competencies that they want their students to get. And I think that we need to, I've said this, I'm a bit of a broken record around this, that we really need to support the teachers to be able to develop their own social emotional competence, help develop their well-being, instead of just throwing programs at them to teach their students when they themselves might not have those skills and competencies. So I feel, I just think we need to focus more on the teachers as well.
I just want to say something about that. It's really important. Unfortunately, there's a huge gap between educational discourse and the reality of education, right? There's a lot of talk, endless talk, but what changes is virtually nothing, right? I mean, we still have exactly the same school system we had 150 years ago with 10 million conferences talking about, 500 zillion ways to change the world, right? And the issue is, it's a structural issue. You can have racism without racists, because the structure itself imposes a certain behavior that no matter how much you try to talk yourself out of that structure, the structure persistently imposes itself. So what we have to start thinking about in order to remedy some of what you're saying is actually enacting profound structural changes, and then we're going to start seeing the world we want to see rather than the world that we're confronted with.
So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, our request is for you all to go home, to go find the child in you. If not, go find the closest child to you and discover the child within you. Safe travels and have a good trip home. Over to John Raymer now to wind up the Compassion Games. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. So, This is the moment we're going to report on how did we do in the game. And remember I said, you cannot lose the Compassion Games. At the same time, there's certain output, there's certain outcomes, there's certain impact. I got more points than anybody. And doesn't mean that I won. In fact, the truth is, you can't pass or fail. The real result is not yet. So I want to tell you what we did, but we're not there yet. We came here to make a breakthrough, and we're not done. So here's what actually happened, because it was, Abel said, this is science, we need some numbers. So the first mission was to befriend the other. There were 74 submissions of there was 112 photos, and more have come in while I was here. Many people told me they had trouble with the guidebook or the internet was slow, but that's how many, I want the numbers to be known. So there were 74 submissions and 112 photos. We had 34, the second one was Better Together, because we want to build a map of social emotional organizations. There were 34 organizations added and 27 people. The third mission was Celebrate Our Shared Humanity. And we did the Wopida ceremony with the Compassion Torch, and I want to show you 2 quick videos that we did. Okay, so let's do the first one.
Hi, I'm Mansa. I'm from India. I'm grateful for being happy, surrounded by happy people, and my wish for people is less depressing people, because people are nowadays sad and people don't get to share their sadness, whatever it may be. It may be emotional, physical, whatever kind of sadness they're unable to share to the world. I hope that decreases in India and all over the world, and I pass this fire to all the depressed people in the world. Thank you.
Okay. It might have been hard to hear, but what she said was so beautiful. We ask each person, introduce yourself. Tell us what you're grateful for, and what is your wish for the world, and who you want to pass the torch for. And she spoke to the depression. She spoke to how many people are suffering. And I thought this was so wise. And we had now one of the, Jacob, I want to hear what another professor had to say, a technologist. Let's do the second video. Same pattern.
Hi, I'm Jacob Schersen from Denmark, and I'm really grateful for living in a time when I can pursue my passions and create games, connecting people, researchers, and citizens around the world to make a difference. I really wish for the world that we seize this unique opportunity now, where technology is growing, not to build divides, but to build hybrid futures where we learn the best of the human and the best of the algorithms and build a future together. I would like to pass the torch to all of the tech companies to take the opportunity now to use their technology for good and for compassion around the world.
There you go, right? Let's not think that technology is the solution. We need to find the best of the technology to empower us to achieve purpose in the world. So I just want to, and we have 17 of those, and we still have time tonight. I'm willing to light the fire. Remember, the result is not yet. You can't fail. Instead of saying pass or fail, the question is not yet. All right. I want to introduce now, next one was mutual mentors. And the idea there was to start to pair up. Find those people that you can find common values with and shared interests. And then look at how your unique resources can be combined together to help each other achieve purpose. And I want to introduce Aryan Salman. Aryan, come up here. From the Global Citizenship Foundation. Like I said, I was a big winner. I built some great mentorships. And I don't know if you know this young man, but I want to give him a moment to tell you about his work.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Aryan Salman. I'm the president of Global Citizenship Foundation. We work with schools on creating global citizenship education innovative schools. The idea of an innovative school here is based on 3 focus areas: GCED dimension to teaching and learning, continuous professional development of teachers, and fostering social entrepreneurship among students. Now, we work on global citizenship education through a bottom-up approach which makes our organization very unique. So what we end up doing is, instead of giving teachers the textbook, we turn teachers into creators and co-creators of deep learning experiences through the toolkit as well as the fellowship opportunity that we provide to schools. So this is what we do, and we also have another program, and any of you can participate in it. It's called 100 Acts of Global Citizenship. We provide you with a global citizenship education passport as well as an organizer for you to go about a process-oriented project-based learning experience. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, sir. So, when I first thought of the game, we called the game Model, Coach, and Care. Model, Coach, and Care. And the folks from Microsoft probably know those terms. That's where I first heard that. So I want to model one thing. I want to stop and give us a chance to say thank you. The tremendous amount of work that was done to make this possible. And we had a team of volunteers working to support the Compassion Games, but I'm specifically speaking to the folks at the Institute and the folks from UNESCO. I know what it is to work your butt off to prepare and anticipate for something like this, that we should show up. So let's take a moment and acknowledge the tremendous gift that they've given us to make this workshop possible. And when I told Abel I'd be willing to come, but only if it wasn't just a single little conference. So 40 days from now, actually a little more than 47, January 27th, we're planning to reconvene, to build the momentum to achieve the call for action, to bring social emotional learning into the mainstream. So I invite everybody here, if you're interested, please reach out. We're going to be gathering on the plains of Zoom. We've done this with hundreds of people, so that the time spent here isn't just a nice experience we've had, but it's actually part of growing a movement to achieve the purpose that we've all set out to achieve in education. With that said, great gratitude. Thank you for playing the Compassion Games. Game on.
I just want to add on, I really love the concept that John came up with. I have hardly seen elders seek mentorship from younger people, and I think whether you look at global citizenship education or 100 Acts or any of the projects that we do, we believe in the power of young people to change our world. So I think this is a great effort and a gesture, and it just reposes the faith that older people can trust in young people to bring about a change. So thank you so much. I have one giveaway to a few educators here. So I have a copy of this book. So this is about launching inspiring educational leadership. So I have 10 copies, so anybody interacting with me, I would like to give this as a gift at this particular event. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of Tech 2019. And I would like to invite Mr. Abel Kane, Head of Rethinking Youth Department of UNESCO MGIP. See, they're already cheering for you.
Everyone keep quiet. Keep quiet. Volunteers.
In action. Okay. So now I give the space to Mr. Abel Kane, Head of Rethinking Youth Department.
Are you awake?
UNESCO MGIP, Gotha, for the thanking note.
Okay. Thank you, Renuka. Good afternoon, everybody. I think good evening, everybody. It's a bit hard to tell the time and the day today. This has been a wonderful 3 days for the third edition of the Transforming Education Conference for Humanity event. It's my duty to thank everybody on behalf of our director, Anantha. Very unfortunately, he had to rush back to Delhi on Monday, and so I had no intention of doing this speech. So while you look at the pretty pictures, I have to go through a list. First, I need to very sincerely thank the state government of Andhra Pradesh. They have been our partner for 3 years in a row, and they are just absolutely beautiful and wonderful people. Of course, we thank the Chief Minister We thank the Minister of Education for giving us a lot of support. Particularly, we need to thank from the ministry Raj Shekhar, China Virabhadru, Hema Prasad, and Pratap Reddy. All right, thank you guys. I know you're here in spirit. I also thank the District Collector's Office. I hope there's a representative from the District Collector's Office of Visakapatnam. Definitely to Mr. Vinay Chand, our District Collector, and definitely to Mrs. Surya Kala and her team. Namita, is Srinivas here? Or any of our team members? They're brilliant. Srinivas and their team are the ones who brought all of our speakers here, and they'll be taking them back and making sure they get on the plane, and then they can complain about me. Okay, and then we have to thank Gitam University. That doesn't mean you're getting A+. That doesn't mean you're graduating. All right. For 3 years in a row, we've had superb support and assistance from Gitam University. They're providing our volunteers. And this year, particularly, Gitam hosted our pre-conference workshops. Thank you very much to our facilitators who conducted the pre-conference workshops out at Gitam University. We hope, MGIP hopes to actually sign a deal with Gitam University for one of our courses that we are creating at MGIEP. Obviously, I must thank our sponsors, Samsung. Quiet. Okay. Darshan, tell the volunteers to keep quiet. We still have the pretty pictures. Very good, very good. There's some ugly pictures coming.